Hi, everyone. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Shelby Wishin, and this is my debriefing on my tutoring session. And this is now take number 3, so hopefully this goes well. So, the overview of the goals and the lesson plan. Basically, the objective was to teach the present tense and have my student have an understanding of the present tense, how to utilize it. Now, specifically, however, this student she's someone that I go to church with, and she's a native Spanish speaker, and she just really wanted to develop more confidence with the English language. So that was more of like a foundational piece to our lesson. It was just helping her have more confidence and faith in herself to use what she knows. So it was supposed to be more of like a confidence booster for her as well, so she could see how much she already knows. And just on a side note, she did ask that I not take any pictures or videos during the tutoring session. So the photos that you'll see are not from our lesson, and they're photos that I found on the internet. And just a quick aside with that as well, for those of you who already have classrooms, if you have content that students need to be adding pictures to, rather than going to Wikimedia Commons and then having to give the photo attributions and like have the kids do it themselves, if they go to a website called photosforclass.com, they have a limited selection of photos on there. However, they have the citations already done. And as you can see at the bottom of this picture, the attribution is right there. So it's pretty nice. So just as an aside, you might want to be using that in your classrooms. Now, a reflection on the activities. They went well, but they were definitely awkward in the setting of only having one student. The way that I planned the lesson, and I don't know why I did this in hindsight, it's so silly, but I had planned quite a bit of like discussion related work and interacting with peers, but it was just the two of us. So in hindsight, that was kind of silly to plan so many breakout activities when there were only two people. So I think that I'm just kind of trained in that sense because that's what I do with my current students. And that's what I did when I was student teaching, but it was very awkward in the sense of tutoring. So now I know for the future that if I'm tutoring a student one-on-one or even just a handful of students, that I'll have to have a totally different dynamic to my lessons, and that's okay. And then as always, I expected too much in the lesson. That's a tendency of mine, is to expect my students to do 100,000 things in 30 minutes, and it's not feasible. So I definitely expected too much in this case as well. And I will have to adjust for that next time as well. And then I struggle with wait time too, where asking a question and then that like pregnant pause before the students answer and they're processing. I always struggle with not like rewording the question and giving hints where if the students just had a little bit more time to think, they would be able to answer on their own. But I'm so quick to jump in and try to help them when they probably don't need my help. So that was feedback that I've gotten in different observations that I've had, and I noticed that it was true in this tutoring session as well. Now, questions raised by my student. My student asked me why I'd given her so many handouts when we weren't using all of them. And we ended up not using all of them because I saw that things were taking longer than I had expected. But I'd given out all of the handouts at the beginning. And so I think she felt stressed that there was so much work to do and we didn't get through it and all of that. And I wonder if it would have been different had we had more time, like if it were a class that you teach consistently every day or every other day, that we could say, okay, and bring that handout to next class and we'll do it. And I make those adjustments all the time on the fly as I'm teaching right now. But it's hard to do that when you only have a 1 hour session with someone that you've planned and that's it. Now, another question that she asked me specifically about the lesson was, are there any irregular verbs in the present tense? And I hadn't really thought to cover that. So I had to think about it and then say, well, have, be, do, and go are common ones. And I was glad that she asked me because it's very important to understand the concept of irregular verbs, and just the more exposure you have to them, the better. So I'm glad that she asked me that because I hadn't thought about it. Now, lingering questions of mine. Is there a general rule of thumb to plan for how long an activity will take an ESL student? Because I know that there's a concept of asking it in the target language, and the student has to translate in his or her head into the native language, construct an answer, and then translate that answer back to the target language. That takes time. But is there kind of a general idea of like, well, usually about like 25 seconds, and then if the student has an answer, then you might want to give a hint or reword it or ask if he or she has a question, kind of thing. So I'd be curious to know about that. And then the next one is more of like a philosophical question, but what is the difference between having high expectations of a student versus overwhelming him or her? Because I really like to push my students, and I think about all the different activities that I do in like in real life of my job and my love for traveling and my love for the outdoors and hiking and rock climbing. And there are times that I'm pushing myself when I'm climbing, and then I really surprise myself and I do a climb that's way harder than I thought I could do, or I hike a mountain that's way higher than I've ever done before. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable and to experience that disequilibrium, because that's how we get better. But especially with ESL students or just people learning another language in general, that I don't want to discourage them from wanting to learn the language. So I don't know, I'd love some suggestions of if anyone has any thoughts about the difference of having high expectations versus overwhelming a student and discouraging him or her. And ultimately, I think that just comes with having a relationship with that student and understanding where he or she is coming from. So I think it will be okay. And this isn't something that's going to like ruin my teaching career, but I want to make sure that I'm pushing my student without um, pushing him or her over the edge and discouraging the English language from being learned. So I'd love some thoughts on that. Improvements for the future. And again, I've really harped on this quite a bit, but I need to plan less information and more processing activities. So that way, if a student needs help with the actual content area being covered, I can sit down with that student or a handful of them that need help. And those who feel okay can move on to different processing activities. And that way, if there's something I need to excise from the lesson, I can do that without getting confused. Because I found when I was trying to adapt and adjust, I had so much content that I was trying to weed down to just the bare essentials because it was taking longer than expected, versus if it were just an activity of like, okay, well, we didn't get to that, but I was trying to adapt actual content, and that was quite hard to do. And I think it was obvious. So just a future note to myself to have less information and just have that be really small, manageable chunks of information and then more processing activities. So that way I can adapt. And it's also a great way to differentiate. If a student totally gets it, he or she can go on to the next activity that will have him or her dive a little bit deeper, be a little bit more immersed, and just making sure that all those processing activities are meaningful and relevant and don't feel like busy work. But it's a great way to differentiate. And then that way I can work with kids who need one-on-one help. So I don't know, but that's just part of growing and getting better as a teacher. So that was just kind of my overview on how my lesson went and the tutoring session went. So I'm excited to see my areas of strength, which I think are just like feeling comfortable in the classroom and building healthy relationships. And I clearly know the English language quite well, so I'm not worried about that. But of just how to adapt the teaching that I've learned from working with native English speakers and how to tweak it and adjust it, knowing that my future students will be those who are learning the English language versus having grown up speaking it. So just it was a learning curve for me, and that's how you get better. So I'm excited to see how I can grow and adapt. So thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope that you learned a few things, and I can't wait to watch all of your videos. Have a good day.